Yo boys and girls, welcome to the Seething Rehan Berserking Blade build guide. The goal of this build is to generate and lose 100 rage as quickly as possible to summon your Seething Spirit. This means that your Seething Spirit will be attacking with Berserking Blade whilst all you do is progress through a beacon. The only problem you're going to have in this build is going back for all that juicy loot you drop. The build is made possible because of the future burn offering memory. This causes your spirit to always exist while you are Berserk, and generating and losing 100 rage means that you summon your Seething Spirit and can actually bypass the summon interval if you do it fast enough. If you need any of the information in this video in written format, you can head on over to the Max Roll build guide. The budget variant can also be found in the build guide on the final page if you are starting out on a lower budget, and this video will also explain how to progress from that lower budget into the end game variant. Berserking Blade is going to be the best choice for our clear skill. This is because it has a great amount of AoE. It also attacks in a full 360-degree circle, and its steep slash effect is that the skill radius we apply to it is also granted to the damage. We're going to support this skill with critical strike damage as we are reaching 100% crit. Slash duet causes all of our attacks to basically have 200% additional attack speed because we have so much steep strike chance. Multi-strike to give us more swings and generate more rage per single click of the mouse. Elemental fusion is just a 40% more multiplier since we are only dealing fire damage. And then raging slash makes that all your steep strikes are dealing 50% additional damage, as well as giving you an increased chance to gain steep strikes. Against bosses or more difficult encounters, I would recommend swapping this out for Flame Slash. Flame Slash just has a much more predictable amount of damage, and it deals considerably more if you manage to overlap the steep strikes. Combines nicely with Focus Strike because it means that if you're attacking the boss from right next to it, you're going to do a lot more damage. This is a very important playstyle if you're going to be bossing with Flame Slash. For the rest of the active skills, Leap Attack is going to be our mobility skill. Combine this with Periodic Burst, Quick Mobility, and Hardened to get 25% damage reduction, as well as a lot more speed around beacons. The faster our Leap Attack can be, the faster we can generate rage. Of course, Leap Attack cannot multi-strike, so you need to Leap Attack 6 times to resummon your Seething Spirit. This is very important if you don't want to keep stopping to actually cast the Berserking Blade yourself. Bull's Rage is just a massive melee damage multiplier. Extended Duration, Mania, Death Will, and Mass Effect all scale its effect. Death Will actually acts to mitigate the life cost. It will instead be dealt over time rather than one big chunk. We're using 2 War Cries. This is because our Infinity is going to come with the War Cries are instant. Resurrection War Cry is an incredible choice for this build as it grants reduced damage taken as well as a huge amount of life because of Emergency Restoration. Emergency Restoration grants more life when you are considered low life, and I'll get into why we are always considered low life later in the build. Residues means that this healing will continue to tick even if we reach full life, so you won't have to constantly spam the skill or use it at the perfect time. And then for the final skill, Fearless Warcry linked with Lion's Roar, Powerful Warcry, and cost conversion. It's very important that you have cost conversion, how I have the build set up here, otherwise you will not be able to cast this. The skill grants a lot of additional damage based on the number of enemies nearby, and also an increased chance to steep strike. For the passive skills, this has gone through many iterations, but what I've settled on is Curse on Hit, Seal Conversion, and Scorch as our curse setup. This fully automates the curse setup and causes you to deal additional fire damage to all the targets that you curse. Precise Death Pact, Bloodthirst, Fixate, and Seal Conversion is the second aura setup. This means that every time you hit an elite enemy, you will trigger Bloodthirst and Fixate. If Precise Death Pact is used, you will have a 100% chance to refresh the duration of these abilities on defeating an enemy. This is very important for Bloodthirst. You will have the additional attack speed bonus for basically the entire beacon. And then the main auras are Precise Charge Flames, Precise Weapon Amplification, and Precise Acuteness Imbue. Weapon Amplification is really important to get as precise, as this will give you a source of paralyze where the build otherwise couldn't get it. And then link these to Restrain and Stand as One to both reduce the amount of mana they seal and also to increase their effect. If you're wondering where to get these, they are found in any Path of the Brave, floor 3 and upwards. You can also purchase these from the auction house by going to the Advanced tab, scrolling down to Skills, clicking on Supports, and typing in what you are wanting to find. For the talents, it's very important that we start in God of Might. The build will be dealing exclusively fire damage. That means fueling is an incredibly strong choice for the build. It means that we can completely eliminate penetration as an affix we have to craft. This makes gearing much easier and means that you can focus on other affixes. Importantly, from God of Might, there is a node that converts 50% of your physical damage to fire damage. This is extremely important, as with 2 of these nodes, we will be able to fully convert the Berserking Blade. The major talent, take Tenacity. It's going to grant you the ability to gain Tenacity blessings on hit, which is important as you need to be able to generate them against bosses. And for the second major talent, as I mentioned, Fueling allows you to completely ignore the enemy fire resistance. Warlord is up next, and it's going to grant you the second 50% of your physical damage to fire damage. It also grants you a permanent source of weaken, since we're always dealing area damage, and it just grants some nice bonuses to fire damage. As for the major talents, Rock is extremely important. It grants you 2 additional maximum Tenacity blessings, as well as giving your Tenacity blessings an extra effect of 15% fire damage. Since we're only dealing fire damage, and we have close to 12 Tenacity blessings, this is up to 180% increased fire damage. Focus Strike and True Flame are both great options in the second major talent slot for this tree. True Flame is going to be much better during beacons, Focus Strike being something you want to look at if you are struggling with damage or you're fighting a lot of bosses. The final talent tree is Blood Striker. It is very, very important and makes the build tick because of the major talent, Sacrifice. You will sacrifice the defensive capabilities of your Tenacity blessings and replace their effect with a more powerful offensive modifier. Instead of the damage reduction they typically grant, they will now grant 8% additional attack speed and skill radius. For the final point, no loose ends, is because we are always considered low life due to our Guttural of the Drowned. This essentially means that we just gain 35% additional damage. If you do not have the corroded version of the Guttural of the Drowned, take Life Path. For the hero traits, let's talk about the options you actually have some control over. At level 32, you're going to select Rampant Emotions. This gives your Seething Spirit an increased chance to deal double damage. It's not the most, but it is quite important because of how it synergizes with the level 50 trait, Growing Anger, which means that whenever your Seething Spirit deals double damage, it will attack an additional time. This is great because of how it interacts with multi-strike. Each of the strikes can deal double damage, so you will very frequently be summoning your Seething Spirit, and it will attack not once, but twice. Level 62, Hysteria is very important, as the build completely relies on generating and losing rage, so this will always be at the max value. You will always gain 40% additional damage from this hero trait. The level 80 hero trait is Rage Infusion. This is very important to the build as it allows you to instantly generate and lose 100 rage by increasing the amount of rage you receive when dealing attacks, and by also increasing the amount of rage you lose when dealing attacks while Berserk. A must-have for this build. Definitely take that at level 80. For hero relics, there are a few options. I decided to go with a Remains of the Father with a causes enemies to explode when killed, dealing up to 10% of their life as physical damage. This is an incredibly powerful mod to be able to get on a relic. It has a 100% chance to cause the enemy to explode, which means you are going to have much wider coverage than you otherwise would. Hero memories are very important to this build. 2 of the hero memories are absolutely crucial to make the build work, the first of which being the Future Burnt Offering. This means that every time you reach 100 rage, you summon your Seething Spirit to deal consecutive multi-strikes. These are performed while you are moving. This is what makes the build so powerful. These will be performed while you're leap attacking through the entire map. Chaotic Oracle is the second important hero memory. It's essential for the build, as Circular Killing does grant that additional base effect to Fervor of 2% increased multi-strike. This means you want to be generating Fervor, and this is the best way to do it. For the final hero memory, I went for one with weapon damage and attack speed. You can get one with double damage. You could also go a bit more defensive and get some erosion resistance, some life. Depends entirely on what you need. I just went with some weapon damage and attack speed. For the gear, as mentioned numerous times, we are going to be using the Circular Killing Legendary Sword. It grants the base additional effect of plus 2% multi-strike chance for every point of Fervor rating. This effect scales with your Fervor effect. It means that every 50% Fervor effect grants an additional multi-strike attack. And because each multi-strike generates as much rage as a standard attack, this means that once you hit a breakpoint of multi-strike, being 500% increased, you will be able to generate 100 rage with a single click of your mouse. The weapon also grants a Meditate, which is a buff. It causes you to take reduced damage and also grants additional damage for each multi-strike. This weapon is basically unbeatable for the build in its current state. I tried crafting a 1100 DPS rare sword. This also had +3 melee skill level and a major talent as the suffix, and it still did not deal as much damage as the circular killing. For the helmet, we're using Fool's Crown. This is because it adds a huge amount of physical damage to the main hand weapon. This damage is then scaled by the % gear physical damage present on the weapon, meaning that this value actually goes much higher. It's actually times by 3 because circular killing has an up to 200% gear physical damage multiplier. For the chest, we've gone for some elemental and erosion resistance, as well as multiple rolls of life. This is made possible with the flat life granted by vigor embers and % life granted by ruling embers. You can then craft on +1 additional stacks of tenacity blessings with technique embers, and then finish it off with the +2 active skill level granted by an ominous ember. For the gloves, one of the most important aspects of the build is the tenacity blessing stacking, and there is no way to make better use of them for this build than the Varagon Shroud. You gain additional steep strike and multi-strike chance for each tenacity blessing you have, as well as a huge 10% additional critical strike attack rating increase and attack speed increase whenever you reach 10 maximum tenacity blessings. You can get these corroded with an implicit that says +1 additional maximum tenacity blessings. This is a very good corrosion, but not mandatory for the build. As for the boots, they are just used to cap off any resistances you're struggling to get, as well as get some more life. There is a very strong damage modifier in the prefixes for the boots. You can get 11% of physical damage added as fire damage, and then if you really want to push the boots up, you can craft with ominous embers to get +1 fire level. For the amulet, this is our main source of defense, as well as enabling some very powerful offensive tools in the build. The item grants a cheat death based on an 8-second cooldown whenever you take fatal damage from a severe injury. Getting the amulet with the corroded modifier so that any non-full life state is considered low life means that any damage you take is considered a severe injury, meaning that any damage that would kill you will not on an 8-second cooldown. You will also restore a percentage of your missing life whenever you take damage. 10% is the amount granted by the amulet, but there is 35% hidden away in the Bloodstriker tree. As soon as you get this low life state, you are going to want to go and grab those points in the Bloodstriker tree to result in a 45% of your life being restored every time you take damage. For the legendary ring, we are using a chaotic ending. There are some very powerful modifiers on this for the build. The most powerful I found is 1 additional tenacity blessing, 10% melee damage per stack of tenacity blessing, and then as much further effect as you can manage. Again, getting as close to 50% as possible is great because it will guarantee that additional strike. Protection ring is a great base for the final ring, as you are going to be struggling with resistances on this build, so that 10% implicit is nice. Craft erosion resistance and 2 other high tier elemental resistances. Whichever you need, make sure you check before starting the craft. Add on melee damage with an amplified ember and craft life using a vigor ember. And then you can actually, if you wish, craft any prefix using an acute fossil and ominous ember until you replace that prefix with +20% life and +20% defense. Finally, there are some very powerful major talents granted by an infinity in this build. I went for Formless to double the effect of Warcries, which results in a lot more healing and damage and reduced damage taken. Alternatively, you can take Fueling and spec into Great Strength. You can take Great Strength. You can also get Rushed. Impending is a very good option. Avoid getting things like Falling Leaves, as this build relies heavily on your weapon damage. Falling Leaves is actually quite a big damage loss for this build, as your weapon damage is the primary source of your flat damage. For the rest of the mods on the Infinity, the Warcry is cast immediately, +1 Warcry skill charge limit is absolutely essential if you want to use Warcries. Otherwise, you're going to have to stop and cast them, and that is completely counterintuitive to how the build is set up. You just want to be leap attacking all the time and never having to stop for anything. Then you can get further effects, elemental resistance, erosion resistance, life, and tenacity blessings. There is a budget variant of this build available. I will link the builder in the description. I spoke about this in this video right here, where I actually used these exact items on my first day of playing this build. Importantly to know, if you are starting off on this budget setup and you want to transition into the endgame build, then the priority for getting items is as follows. Number 1, Future Burnt Offering. Number 2, Chaotic Oracle. Number 3, Circular Killing. Number 4, Fool's Crown. and 5 that Guttural of the Drowned with the Corrode.